Thailand and Vietnam are two of the most populated countries in the world, with over 67 million and 96 million people respectively. But sandwiched between these two is Laos and Cambodia, who have less than half of the population of Thailand, with only 7.5 and 16.5 million people respectively. And even more surprising is that they both share a land border with Thailand and Vietnam, and thus have access to the same Mekong River. So why aren't these two countries more populated? Why are they so empty? In this episode, we'll take a look at the reasons why these two countries are absurdly empty. If you enjoy this episode, stay tuned for many more. Laos is the least densely populated country in the world, with only 36 people per square kilometer compared to 136 in Vietnam and 140 in Thailand. And Cambodia isn't far behind at 64 people per square kilometer. Even their biggest city, Phnom Penh, only has 1,500 people per square kilometer. For perspective, Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam has 9,000. Well, first off, let's take a look at its geography. As you can see, Laos is completely landlocked, meaning it has no access to the ocean. This makes it difficult to trade with other countries, and also means that Laos can't use fishing or tourism as a source of protein or income. Surrounding the country are mountainous ranges, including the Annamese and the Himalayas, which cover around 3/4 of the country. This makes agriculture and infrastructure development quite challenging, as there's barely any flat land, and the mountains also inhibit the free flow of goods. In fact, only 6.2% of the country is arable land. To make things worse, the Mekong River runs along its western border with Thailand, but it's too shallow to be used for transport. So although Laos is surrounded by large bodies of water, it's pretty much useless for trade and infrastructure. This lack of infrastructure and arable land has made it difficult for Laos to develop its economy and attract large numbers of people. But what about Cambodia? Well, Cambodia also has some geographic limitations. Unlike Laos, Cambodia does have access to the sea, but its coastline is relatively short at only 440 kilometers. Furthermore, the Mekong River Delta, which feeds into the South China Sea, does not belong to Cambodia, but rather Vietnam. Although Cambodia does have access to the Tonle Sap Lake, the largest freshwater lake in Southeast Asia, which could potentially support a large fishing industry, it also suffers from severe droughts during the dry season, making it sometimes nearly unusable. Additionally, the lake has faced severe water level fluctuations due to climate change, affecting its ecosystem and the livelihoods of the people who depend on it. The Mekong River, on the other hand, forms a natural border with Laos to the north, Thailand to the northwest, and Vietnam to the east, limiting Cambodia's territorial expansion and potential agricultural land. Although geography plays a role in explaining Cambodia's low population, it doesn't explain the whole picture. Cambodia once boasted a population of 9 million people during the peak of the Khmer Rouge regime, but after decades of conflict, only 7.5 million people remained. What happened to the rest of the population? Before the Khmer Rouge, Cambodia was known as the Khmer Empire, which reached its peak during the 9th and 10th centuries. The empire left behind impressive ruins, such as Angkor Thom and Angkor Wat, testaments to its grandeur and sophistication. However, the empire's decline began in the 14th century due to environmental issues, overpopulation, and attacks from neighboring states. By the 16th century, the empire had collapsed, and the region fell into chaos. Vietnam then took control of Cambodia in the early 19th century, but this didn't last long as the French returned it back to the Siamese, modern-day Thailand. This period of instability and foreign domination lasted until 1953, when Cambodia finally gained independence from the Dutch. But this newfound freedom didn't bring prosperity, as the country soon descended into civil war between the Khmer Rouge and the Cambodian People's National Army. This internal strife deterred people from settling down and raising families, leading to low birth rates and high levels of migration. But this instability would soon be disrupted by an external force that would change the course of Cambodian history forever. When the Vietnam War broke out, Cambodia became a battleground between the communist-backed Viet Cong and the US-backed South Vietnamese forces. The conflict spilled over the border as the US and South Vietnamese troops pursued Viet Cong guerrillas into Cambodian sanctuaries. By 1965, US military advisors were present in Cambodia, assisting the South Vietnamese. And by 1969, American combat operations were underway. This led to the steady erosion of neutrality in Cambodia and ultimately resulted in the fall of the Lon Nol regime in 1975 and the establishment of the Democratic Kampuchea under the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge was a fanatical communist regime led by Pol Pot. It aimed to transform Cambodia into an agrarian society by forcibly relocating its urban population to the countryside. But this drastic shift led to widespread famine and the deaths of millions. The Khmer Rouge's radical policies included the burning of schools and hospitals, forcing women into hard labor, and prohibiting the use of modern medicine and technology. Their goal was to turn Cambodia into a self-sufficient state by cutting off all ties with the outside world, including banning foreign languages and traditional holidays. But this isolationist approach led to Cambodia being cut off from vital international aid and trade, and the lack of foreign investment hindered the country's economic growth. To make matters worse, the Khmer Rouge's military ambitions led to costly and unsuccessful campaigns against neighboring countries. The regime invaded Thailand in 1978, but was defeated by the Thai army. This invasion resulted in a refugee crisis, as hundreds of thousands of Cambodians fled to neighboring countries. The following year, Vietnam sent its troops into Cambodia to oust the Khmer Rouge, ending their brutal reign. But this intervention led to a new conflict as anti-Vietnamese sentiment grew among the Cambodian people. A 3-year war ensued between the Vietnamese-backed government and various anti-Vietnamese rebel groups. The war devastated the country and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. It wasn't until 1999 that the UN Transitional Authority in Cambodia was established to oversee the country's transition to democracy and peace. During the Vietnam War, Laos was heavily bombed by both sides. From 1964 to 1973, the U.S. dropped 2.4 million tons of bombs on Laos, an area roughly the size of Connecticut. In fact, Laos suffered the most intense bombing per capita in the history of aerial warfare. There were 883 bombing missions per square kilometer compared to 468 in Japan during World War II. But despite all this, Laos and Cambodia are now experiencing population growth again. After years of hardship and conflict, both countries are now enjoying relative peace and stability, which has allowed them to begin rebuilding their populations. Although it will take many decades for their populations to return to pre-conflict levels, their recent population growth rates are encouraging, and hopefully this trend will continue in the future. So there you have it, the reasons why Cambodia and Laos are so empty.